In the previous modules, we have discussed about the structure of any forensic science laboratory and different scope of different divisions of forensic science laboratory. In this module, which is related with the principles of forensic science, learning outcome. After studying this module, you shall be able to know about the Locard's principle of exchange and learn about the principles of comparison, individuality, progressive change and analysis, and also know about the law of probability. Introduction. Forensic science is about the gathering and examining the information about the past which can be effectively used in the court of law. In modern use, the term forensics in place of forensic science can be considered correct, as the term forensics is effectively a synonym for legal or related to court of law. However, the term is now so closely associated with the scientific field that many dictionaries include the meaning that equates the word forensics with the forensic science. The various principles of forensic science forms the basis of scientific investigation. These principles help in resolving the crime in scientific manner which can stand in the court of law. Let us now try to understand this module with the help of visuals and graphics.
Locard's principle of mutual exchange. Edmund Locard is unarguably most famous for his formulation of Locard's principle of mutual exchange, a theory that relates to the transfer of the trace evidence between objects to which they come in contact with. Dr. Edmund Locard was a pioneer in forensic science who became known as the Sherlock Holmes of France. He formulated the basic principle of forensic science: every contact leaves a trace. This became known as Locard's exchange principle. The principle, every contact leaves a trace, first enunciated by French scientist Edmond Locard, explains that whenever a contact is established between two surfaces, there will be a mutual exchange of matter across the contact boundary. That is, when a criminal or his instruments of crime come in contact with the victim or the objects in its vicinity, they will always exchange some traces with each other. According to this principle, it is virtually impossible for a criminal to commit a crime without leaving evidence behind and carrying away with him. Likewise, the criminal or his instruments also pick up traces from same contact. If these trace evidences left on the crime scene and accused are properly examined, these can establish a decisive link between the suspect and the victim or ascertain their presence with the scene of crime, which forms the basis of scientific crime investigation. Although Locard's exchange principle largely states that when a contact occurs between two items, there will always be an exchange of matter between them, Edmund Locard never actually wrote these words in the vast amount of material he produced, nor did he mention anything concerning this principle. Locard, however, did write the following: it is practically impossible for a criminal to commit the crime, especially considering the intensity of a crime, without leaving traces of his presence. This elaborates the fact that Locard had a strong belief that no matter wherever the criminal escapes or what a criminal does, how efficient he is, he will always leave something or the other at the scene of crime. At the same time, he will also take something back from there along with him. A criminal can leave all sorts of evidences, including fingerprints, footprints, hair, skin, muscles, blood, bodily fluids, pieces of clothing, and other types of evidences possible according to the nature of crime. By coming into contact with these things at the crime scene, a criminal also takes a part of that scene with him, whether it's dirt, hair, or any type of trace evidence. Dr. Locard justified this principle during many of his scientific investigations. In one of the investigations in the year 1912, when he investigated the case of a French woman named Marie Latelet, who was found dead in her parents' home, her then boyfriend, Émile Gorbin, was interrogated by the police. He claimed he had been playing a game of cards with some of his friends on the night of the death of his girlfriend. When his friends were questioned, it became clear that he was telling the truth. Later, when Locard examined at the body of Marie Latelet, however, he was led to believe otherwise. He first examined Latelet's body and found a clear evidence that certainly she was strangled to death. He then scraped underneath the fingernails, that is, trace evidence in this case, of Gorbin for taking the skin cell sample. He later viewed the results underneath a microscope. Very soon, Locard noticed a pink dust among the samples he collected from his prime suspect, which he figured to be from ladies' makeup. Thus, the principle of mutual exchange helped Locard come a decisive output as to the involvement of Gorbin in Marie's strangulation. The basic requirement of the principle is the correct answer to the question: what are the places or objects with which the criminal or his tools actually come in contact during the commission of the crime? If the investigator officer manages to somehow establish the correct points of contact and thus a correct investigatory lead, he is most likely to be benefited in the investigation. The following are the most probable locations. Point of entry: if a criminal enters the premises through a ventilator, he leaves his footprints or fingerprints in dust on the shelf. At crime scene, while committing a crime, if he breaks a window or a door, he leaves its mark over the wooden frame, or the burglar, who opens the safe by using an explosive or any other means, like hammering, etc., leaves the area around and the clothes covered with insulating material, as well as some exploded and unexploded material. Point of exit: after committing the crime, when the criminal tends to leave the crime scene, he is most likely to leave and carry some minute traces, for example, his footprints at the point of exit. It is although very rare that he dares to or neglect to leave or carry gross objects or traces on a thorough search. The ambiguous traces will always be found in all the types of crimes one does. These trace evidences left owing to the principle of exchange help to connect the crime and the criminals as effectively as the bigger objects or traces. Law of individuality: every object, natural or man-made, has an individuality, which is not duplicated in any other object. In other words, no two things in this universe are alike even when they are manufactured in the same machine one after the other. This principle at first seems to be contrary to the common beliefs and observations made. The minute grains of sand or common salt, seeds of plants, or twins look alike exactly. Similarly, the man-made objects like coins of the same denominations manufactured, currency notes printed with the same printing blocks one after the other, excluding serial number of the currencies, and typewriters of the same make, model, and batch appear to be indistinguishable, yet the individual characteristics are always there. There are some flaws in the materials through mixing of raw material, fluctuation in electricity, wear and tear defects of the machine, in the arrangement of the crystals, imperfect stamping, or due to inclusion of some extraneous matter. These individual characteristics can be useful in distinguishing intra and inter-batch variations. The most extensive work has been carried out on fingerprints. Several fingerprints, up to the order of millions, have been examined, but no two fingerprints, even from two fingers of the same person, have ever been found to be identical. In a series of experiments carried out by the scientists on superimposition techniques for fingerprints, footprints, tool marks obtained from various parts of firearms, it was observed that with the best of efforts, exactly alike superimpositions, even imprints from the same finger, could not be produced. The fingerprints were taken one after the other on the same paper with the same ink and by the same person, yet they failed to give perfect superimpositions. Imperfect inking, unequal pressure, slight differences in the text, the surface of the paper, or interferences from extraneous matter always introduced some differences. The law of individuality has fundamental importance and formed the basis of forensic identification. Anything and everything involved in a crime has individuality. If the same is established, it links the crime and the criminal. Law of progressive change. Another important principle which affect the quality of analysis and their results in the lab or otherwise is the law of progressive change. According to this principle, everything changes with the passage of time. The rate of change varies tremendously with different types of objects. It has a giant impact on the forensic science investigations. For example, the criminals undergo several progressive changes with time. If he is not apprehended in time, he becomes unrecognizable except, perhaps, through his fingerprints, bone structures, fractures, or any other characteristics of permanent nature, which may or may not be always available, therefore not dependable. The scene of crime also undergoes rapid changes. The weather, the vegetable growth, and the living beings, especially human beings, make extensive changes in comparatively short periods. Longer the delay in examining the scene, greater will be the changes. After some time, the scene may become unrecognizable. The evidences involved in crime may be affected by external conditions, change gradually, like the firearm barrels loosen, metal objects rust, the shoe or shoe prints suffer additional wear and tear, and the tools acquire new surface patterns. The degree of change depends upon the time, the upkeep and the use or the misuse of the particular object. In course of time, the object may sometimes lose all practical identity with a particular crime. So, the principle demands prompt action in criminal investigations. Principle of comparison. This principle is very important, particularly in the laboratory investigation, that is, the type of specimen or sample required for comparison in the lab. It states that only the likes can be compared. It emphasizes the necessity to provide like or similar types of samples and specimens for comparison with the questioned items. For example, in any murder case, if a bullet is found from a body of the deceased and the expert opinion states that the bullet has been fired from a high velocity firearm, then it becomes useless to send in for a shotgun or pistol or revolver for comparison of the firearm under question. Similarly, if a bunch of hair is recovered from the hands of a deceased and the expert opines that the hair belongs to a negroid person, in such a case, hair from persons of white races for comparison will not be of any use. Another example can be if the questioned document contains typewritten text, then there is no use in sending handwritten or printed specimen for comparison. So, there is an important requirement according to this principle to supply specimen or samples of similar nature for proper comparison with the questioned sample recovered from the crime scene. Principle of analysis. This principle have great significance in the laboratory investigation of the clue materials. It states that the analysis can be no better than the sample analyzed. Improper sampling contaminations render the best analysis useless. This principle emphasizes on the necessity to collect proper sample and properly packed for effective use of experts. In any rape case, the investigating officer collects the clothes of the victim which carry both blood and semen stains. The investigating officer, after properly drying the clothes, packs them in such a way that the affected area or areas containing stains should not touch each other and not even to the walls of the container, and sends them to the forensic science laboratory for examination. He wants to know if the clothes carry semen stains. If so, to which blood group does the sample belong? Law of probability. All identifications, be it a definite or an indefinite one, are made consciously or unconsciously, always on the basis of law of probability. Probability is largely the most misunderstood phenomenon. If we state that according to the law of probability, a particular fingerprint has been taken from a given source, then the defense counsels make most of the word and plead that it is not a definite opinion, that is, the counters the probability. Thus, it is not customary to consider probability or probability figures in the court of law. Probability is a mathematical concept which determines the chance of occurrence of a particular event in a particular way of a number of ways in which the event can take place or fail to take place with equal facility. If P presents probability, N is the number of ways in which the event can successfully occur with equal facility, and Nf the number of ways in which it can fail with equal facility. The probability of success is given by the formula P is equal to Ns divided by Ns plus Nf. If the event consists of two occurrences which can take place independently, the probability of the second occurrence is also given by the same formula. If we denote probabilities of the first and second occurrences by attaching digits 1 and 2 to the relevant letters, the net probability, that is P, are given by the formula Pt is equal to P1 into P2, which is equal to Ns1 divided by Ns1 plus Nf1 into Ns2 divided by Ns2 plus Nf2. Problem of proof. The question of proof in a criminal trial is becoming a difficult problem every day. It is related with men, law, and facts. The behavior of the men is habituated by their education, temperament, and financial status, intelligence, and their bias. The law varies from land to land and is composed of enactments, rulings, conventions, and precedences. Changes in law are comparatively slow. The facts that can be proved or may be disproved owing to the circumstances and physical evidences through the witnesses. Witness may be eyewitness or may be expert witness. The latter base their findings on scientific observations. The evidence is scrutinized by counsels and evaluated by courts. Oral evidence. The dependence on the oral evidence is placed in accordance with the observations of eyewitnesses, although experiences and experiments have repeatedly proved that sometimes these can be unreliable. The facts judicially noticeable and facts admitted are need not be proved. Oral and documentary evidence are not only media of proof. Two broad rules in regard to oral evidence are: firstly, that all facts except contents of documents may be proved by oral evidence, and secondly, that oral evidence in all cases must be direct and not hearsay. The meaning of expression oral evidence is given along with the definition of the term evidence in Section 3 of Indian Evidence Act as: evidence means and includes all statements which the court permits or requires to be made before it by witnesses in relation to matters of fact under inquiry, such as statements are called evidences. All documents, including records produced for the inspection of the court, such documents are called documentary evidence. Section 59 of the Indian Evidence Act reads as: all facts except the content of documents or electronic records may be proved by oral evidence principle. This section lays down that all facts may be proved by oral evidence except the content of the document. The section is rather loosely worded as it makes an unqualified statement as regards the exclusion of oral evidence to prove the content of the document. The true position is that oral evidence can lead as evidence relating to documents under Section 65. In general, the evidence of a witness is given orally, and this means oral evidence. The expression oral evidence, therefore, includes the statements of victims before the court which the court either permits or requires them to make. The statement may be made by any method by which the witness is capable of making it. A witness who cannot speak may communicate of facts to the court by sign or by writing, and in either case it will be regarded as oral evidence. Thus, where a woman was unable to speak because her throat was cut and she suggested the name of her assailant by the signs of her hand, that was held to be a verbal statement relevant as a dying declaration.
Summary. In this module, you must have become aware about the various principles of forensic science and their application in scientific investigation of crime. And they play a very important role and are thus basis for scientific investigation of crime. Thank you.